Is over. Board members can come back to their seats. All right, board members, let's gather around the table. Okay, let's go ahead and kick off the next part of our work session, strategic planning update. We have some familiar faces. Our old friend Hank Dimitro is back, and Dan Paris, also our old friend, here to talk about...
emphasis on old.
Where we are now.
He's getting old.
Okay, all right, take it away.
Thanks, Pat. I've always thought that batting third was a good position to be in, but I might have miscalculated the number of pitches the first two batters were going to get before we came up today. So I'm happy to be with you, with Hank, to talk about our strategic planning effort, and I hope you saved a little energy to have a rousing conversation with us. Our mission today is really to cover two components under phase one of our planning initiative, and I'll just kind of back it up for you so we remember that our proposal included three phases of the work. The first phase was to determine the relative position of the district. The second phase was to build out the plan. And the third phase was to work with our partners to assist in implementation. So in the first phase, which we've already completed a number of steps. ECRA's done individual board interviews. We've done focus groups across the 8 clusters. We did 3 community meetings at the same time. We have worked with ECRA to move some data in their direction, and we'll continue to do that. Our partners helped us to facilitate a focus group amongst the LT members. So we've made substantial progress in that direction, and we have a couple more steps to finish off to get us in good shape for phase one. So the two questions that we wanted to engage today with you, one is to take a brief revisit to our position on the mission, vision, and beliefs, which I'll let Hank handle. And then we also wanted to let you have a pre-look at the design for the instrument that we want to send out to the community, which is set up for May 5th or thereabouts, and we're gearing ourselves up to partner to make sure that we do that well. And we wanted to make sure that we were collecting the information that you would need. So I'm happy to turn it over to Hank to begin our conversation around those 2 points.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come back and work with you again. The belief, mission, and vision was a document that you revisited about a year ago and had some discussion about your beliefs, your mission, and your vision. And we just wanted to take this opportunity before we move forward with the community survey to make sure that the beliefs are the way that you want them, the mission particularly is the way that you want it, and the vision is the way that you want it from the discussion that you had before, because one of the pieces of feedback that Gina received in the individual meetings with board members was a couple of people thought maybe there needed to be some work on revisiting those issues. So if you're going to revisit them, either revisiting them to some degree today to say what the questions are or what the issues are that may need to be discussed, or at least acknowledging that they should be revisited as part of the strategic planning process should happen. Because if you want them to remain as they are, we should be communicating that to the community, that these are the beliefs, here's the mission, here's the vision. We do have one question on the survey right now about the mission, and do you agree with it, to see how your community feels about the mission statement and any thoughts that they want to give you feedback on. But if you want some feedback on the beliefs, the mission, and the vision, we should make sure that we're incorporating that into the survey that's going to go out on May 5th. So we just wanted to give you one more opportunity to touch base on this topic to see if there's more to do on these 3 items and if they should be a more detailed part of the survey instrument.
Okay, any takers? Yes, Ms. Darren Kofax.
So, Hank, these recommendations to look at these came from some of our colleagues here on the table. They felt that there should be an updated look at them.
Gina shared with me that a couple of board members said, should we be looking at the beliefs, mission, and vision as part of this process? Or should we just affirm where we are with them?
Okay. I would say I do feel that even though they were originally developed by a different board, that we took ownership by taking time in retreats and other work sessions, refining them to call them our own. So my advocacy would be that they are reflective of this current board's structure. I believe that they should be taken out to the community as such because I believe they are reflective of what we like. And of course, if any refinements come from there, if there's something that the community feels or the public feels that we're missing, I think we would be amiable to looking at them back then. So obviously, by my comments, I was not one of those board members that felt we as a board needed to look at them prior to taking them out to the community.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin?
One of the things that I'm looking at here that I just have a concern based on what we have discussed as a board over the last several years is the mental health and well-being of our students. And as I read the beliefs, mission, and vision, I'm not sure where it's captured. I hear and see things like self-motivation and personal responsibility, but I don't see where we're talking about trying to address resiliency, social emotional skills that we have deemed essential. And in fact, we have essential life skills as our goal number 2. But that is a concern that I have. I'm just wondering, given where we're trying to go with Portrait of a Graduate, and given that we are trying to, as leaders, help our public understand that, successful student achievement does encompass the health and well-being of students, then I think it's important. If we're going to go out to the public, it should be reflected there. Otherwise, I think we're remiss.
All right, Mrs. Smith?
I agree with Tammy.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Velkoff?
I believe that every 4 years, this should be revisited by the board. And we already did that. So I think we don't need to go back through this. I think any of us can have some new thoughts, but let's wait a couple of years until the next election.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Strauss?
In response to Mrs. McLaughlin's piece, because it is important that health will be in here, and the third on the beliefs, we say, we thrive in a vibrant, healthful, safe, enriching, and respectful environment. And I guess my reflection is I believe that that is there, but maybe not. But that's where I do see that, and whether or not an additional word or something is needed, but I do see, it's my interpretation that that's where it is.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mrs. Schultz?
One thing that I think that we've continued to struggle with, and whether it's SAC or advocates and the school advocates, the school liaison officers, pre-K, a lot of different issues we've brought up. we've never captured the idea of wraparound services in a community school. And I feel like everything we talk about maybe tangentially applies to it, but we don't ascribe to or have a goal driven towards community-based schools to meet the various and dynamic, really fluid, changing demography within the county. And, whether it's, to some degree, I agree with Mr. Velikoff, you can't revisit your statements every year, but if you find that you haven't captured something, then I do think you have a duty to not wait 3 years to go back just because you feel you've already been there.
Okay, anyone else? My own feeling about it is, I don't think any of us has any stomach for doing this right now. So, like today, to revisit all this, because we know how much time it takes to do that, I think. But I also feel like the fit between these statements and where we're headed with Portrait of a Graduate is not smooth, in my view. I think you really have to do some tweaking to see where it all fits. But I think it probably does well enough, But I would like for the community to have this somewhere on the table when they're talking about our strategic plan. So is that what you're asking us to? Could we just put this out, not for the community or anybody to spend a lot of time on it, but just to get feedback from the community, impressions from the community on these statements? Is that?
Right now, there is one question on the mission statement as to how they feel about that, but you could add a question about the belief statements if you wanted to. I don't know if you want to do a response to each one of the belief statements. That might get a little lengthy. You could ask a question about the vision statement, or you could ask if there are a couple of nuanced information.
I've been assigned to assist.
It could be that if there's a couple of belief statements, such as health and well-being or wraparound services, you could ask a question of, do you want to add a belief statement, or how important do you believe it is to add a belief statement? There also is one other opportunity that you could use to establish the priorities, because on the surveys, there's a list of about 18 themes and issues that emerge from the focus groups, and some of the ideas about wraparound services or health and well-being could be added to that list of suggested topics to say, how important are these? So to not necessarily touch the belief statement right now, but if one of those topics emerges as an important topic from the community as an area of emphasis, it might lead to the addition of a belief statement as part of the process. So you have a couple of places that you could ask those questions on the survey to find out where the community is. In terms of the whole portrait of the graduate and the alignment piece, I think that can be part of the strategic planning process. I don't think we use the language of portrait of the graduate in the survey right now, because we weren't sure how widespread the knowledge base would be amongst your stakeholders about portrait of a graduate. And are you asking a question that they really can't answer yet till they go through the strategic planning process and you talk more about that and you share that information? So I think there's some ways, if you have some identified topics that you want to collect community input to see how important it is, so that you have the information to go back and revisit the belief statement. If it does emerge as a really significant issue for your community, it might mean adding a belief statement as part of the redesign of the strategic plan.
I think if I could provide some context of somebody that's been on the receiving end of this at a school level, one of the quotes that's worked for me recently is Drucker's quote that says, if you get your basic assumptions wrong, everything you do after that will be wrong. So I think a lot of times in your planning process, you look at this and you say, hey, the setup of it at the mission level or the vision level, let's get into the meat of the matter. What are we going to identify as strategies and priorities? That you do have to pay your due diligence to the top end of this to say, okay, is it going to field the broad level of what I believe education should do? So when I look at the pieces that are emerging in this process, so you can't really just say, is it all captured in the mission? Is it all captured in the beliefs? These things cascade underneath to where when you build out the whole plan, does that provide you with the picture that you're looking for the division and enough direction to go forward? So when our original SAG goals were launched as a principal, I was inspired by them, but I didn't have as much clarity as I probably needed as a practitioner about how to make that a reality within my school. I got better at it, and our schools got better at it over time. When I look at our work with the Portrait of a Graduate, because I believe that one of the key pieces of this work will be a more balanced assessment framework of what you hope to achieve with a kid, I look at that and I go, I can see elements of this in my own kids. This is real to me. I don't think my kids do all of those things. I don't know if it would be possible, but I would hope that they could. I would aspire that they could. So I think this point at the top, the 2 points that I would suggest is make sure that you're squared up, that this piece is enough to hold what you would envision would come after it. Understand that the pieces that cascade within it are really going to paint the whole picture. And I think that would give us the starting point that we need.
So then right now, we have going out on the survey, just the mission statement is what you're saying. Okay. How do people feel about adding the others, the beliefs and vision on the survey, and just sort of asking a general question like about them? Kathy?
I think it's too much. I don't support. I think the mission statement's easy for people to look at. I do think the beliefs came from us working together to talk about what we believed in. So I'm fine with just the mission statement.
Yes, Ms. Evans?
Yeah, I think it's too much to ask people just one question about. It's it's got so many elements in it. I would welcome adding a question on the survey about student wellness, though, if that's one way to get at that. So I think we could do it that way rather than having the entire thing and having people comment on it.
Okay, so the suggestion that we ask a question, do you believe that student wellness is a fundamental belief or value for our school system?
I haven't really thought about the wording, but, something about the important. I mean, I'm looking at the survey now, and it's, some of them are very simple. Just, is this an important element for the school system? And, I think you could have a simple question about it.
Yes, Ms. McLaughlin?
On the survey, specifically, I just happened to be looking at the parent survey, question number 10. Question number 10 says the social and emotional needs of Fairfax County students are being addressed. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, it's there. It doesn't necessarily say, do you think it's important, but it is just asking if we do it.
Yes.
Well, and Dr. Garza was saying 19, and I agree, it's getting at that, although I think that question is one of the more, it's a little complex. You might take a look at it, whether because most of these questions are actually pretty straightforward and simple, and so that one, to me, looks like it's more complex, balancing this with that and all that. I think you could simplify 19 and get at it.
We seem to be evolving into the discussion of the survey, which is good. I do want to have a quick question, though. I identified two themes that people said might be something that should be explored further. One was mental health and well-being of students, and the other one was wraparound services in community-based schools. And so we can think about those issues in a minute. Were there other high-level issues that as you looked at the belief statements, the mission statement, and the vision, that you think need to be addressed in some form or fashion?
As I took a step back and read this, when I read the mission and I read the words empowering students to meet high academic standards, that one kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, and I thought using a language more like help students achieve their potential. I mean, kind of emphasizing the whole child. I just, when you read these words through different lenses, you start to see high expectations, I don't know, I just feel like maybe we should look at our words carefully and make sure we're not sending a message perhaps that we don't even realize that we're sending to our community about, high expectations maybe that kids can't meet.
Like full potential is different.
Yeah, achieving your full potential is different than meeting high academic standards. It's just a thought. I mean, I'm happy with the language. We've spent a lot of time on this, but again, looking at it with fresh eyes, that just struck me.
Okay.
Mrs. Smith, did you want to respond?
So are we going to discuss this then?
Well, I mean, I think fundamentally we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to go back and wordsmith again, what we spent a lot of time wordsmithing? Anybody?
I'm not willing to do that. Okay.
And I'm not suggesting wordsmithing at this point in time. I am suggesting, though, if there are issues that emerged out of this, I'd kind of like to know what they are. So if there's a way we can collect community perception as part of the survey and give you that information back so that as part of the planning process, when you're refining your plan, you may have more information to be making those decisions of, do you need to include this idea someplace? So I think that's helpful in terms of, I do think there's actually a question on that emerged from the focus groups about children tapping into their potential. But we can come back to that in a minute. Any other thoughts on general topics?
Mr. Kovacs?
You had made an earlier statement that you really didn't call to attention the actual name Portrait of a Graduate. I'm assuming that what you did is you took our belief statement and you took the information from Portrait of a Graduate and then developed your questions based upon kind of a meshing of those two. Is that a correct assumption? Or did you not use the Portrait of a Graduate information at all? That's my, I guess.
The concepts were there.
Correct.
But many of the things that emerged on the survey emerged from the focus groups and the feedback from your stakeholders as to the topics that they identified. So if there is something that you want to specifically add regarding a topic that didn't emerge, this is the time that we should make sure we include it on the survey to get you the information that you need.
Could I ask Mr. Paris, since you're the person, the staff person, if Dr. Garza, if Mr. Paris would be allowed to, because I don't think at this point in time that we have all of those documents in front of us, would Mr. Paris be able to go through that Portrait of a Graduate to make certain? Because that is one of the things that we have at least in concept agreed to strategically that we want to put out there. So if Mr. Paris, you could go through, or someone on your staff go through the 5-column sheet that we have to ensure that those questions or the concepts that we are hoping to achieve through that discussion of Portrait of a Graduate are questions we're asking.
So, yes, we certainly can do that. And just to provide the context to this, so one of the pieces that makes me excited about doing this work and having been around for a while, look at and say, okay, how would I make this process different? And one of the things that I want to make sure happens is that there's a clear through line to schools and to teachers and to the community to make sure that they understand this process moving forward within the best of our ability. So with the Portrait of a Graduate, in setting the stage for this process, I went to the Elementary Principals Association, the Middle School Principals Association, the High School Principals Association, the Business Advisory Council, the Teacher Advisory Council to the Superintendent. We discussed it within our retreat, and I've done this with several cluster groups. So I think within these focus groups, this was a priority that was on their mind of many of the people that were coming into it. There's still work to be done to make sure this is spiraled out, but I know in that conversation that the notion of Portrait of a Graduate and the excitement that generated was in the room. But I will go back to make sure that what we have.
Just to ensure, I think, because to me that logically makes sense. You're looking at all of the belief statements, making certain you're asking questions based upon that, and then taking that information that we garnered from Portrait of a Graduate and making sure you're asking those questions. So do you believe that, this bullet point that from the Portrait of the Graduate where we ended up with that? So you understand what I'm saying, and I think that would be helpful to us because I don't think as a board we have the time right now to
Understood.
answer Hank's question adequately.
Okay.
Dr. Garza?
Excuse me, yes. I agree that, actually, I think the document's very well done. But I think there are times when you have to revisit it to make sure that it's reflective of our current priorities as a division. And when I reflect back, and I know that we don't want to get into wordsmithing or redesigning tonight or even really digging through the surveys too much, but when I reflect on what I've heard from board members that over the last year, not quite a year yet, Hank, but almost, about what I've heard time and time again is really important to this board, and is important to me, quite frankly, and something we really have to work to guard against in a large organization like we are, is that we're responsive and caring, and that we demonstrate that. And that's not Karen's words. In fact, Hank, you know that was one of the priorities that you all gave me as a superintendent. Responsive, caring culture. So, I guess more of a question, Hank. Is that really reflected in the surveys? And it's not to suggest that we aren't. I think it's something we always have to guard ourselves against. Is how how easy it is for people to interact with our system, and how do they feel when they interact with our system. So, in terms of just a community of care, and if the document should reflect what we think is important as a system, I do think I wouldn't suggest changing anything else. But maybe we do need to have a little bit more specificity and be more overt about we want to be a community of care. We want to be responsive. We want to be caring.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Okay.
All right, Ms. McLaughlin?
What a perfect segue, because one of the things I made a note on when I was looking through the surveys, I read it as both a parent and a school board member to try and make sure that it'll hopefully make sense to the people who are taking it. And the note I made was, schools are supportive of my child's needs. I like actually Karen's word better, caring. But one of the things I saw in question 41 is school employees are responsive to parents. And I think even if you just inserted the word responsive and caring, or is it that you want to separate them out because you can be responsive but not necessarily demonstrate being supportive or caring. And so, that is something that I specifically noted I didn't think we were capturing, but I think as a system we do want for our system to demonstrate to our families.
And Hank, and I was thinking of that even more expansive than that in terms of how do our employees feel. Mm-hmm. So on the employee survey, I don't want to go through the questions or anything. It's just a question for you. Do we ask our employees how are they valued? Do they feel like the system demonstrates care about their well-being? So it's not, it's all of those things, all components of our system.
Let me just give you the kind of overview of the survey. So you have 4 different surveys because we're doing 4 different stakeholder groups: students, parents, employees, and community members. So if you look at part 1, that's the question about the mission statement. That's the same on all 4 surveys of that FCPS provides high-quality education is kind of a generic overview. And then what do you think about the mission statement? How much do you agree with it, and any additional thoughts? Part 2 are the same on all the surveys as well, in terms of all of the satisfaction issues of FCPS provides quality programs and curriculum, teachers provide quality instruction, teachers use technology. So they're kind of an assessment of the current state of affairs. And you could ask a question there, which is not there right now, to say, FCPS is a responsive and caring organization, and let people respond to that of how much do they agree with that. And it would go to employees and parents and students in terms of using that language to get some feedback as to whether people believe that's the current state of affairs. So we're not limited to the number of questions that we want to ask. We can add that to it, if that would be helpful. Then when you get to section 3, those were the issues that emerged as topics that people identified when they were asked, what's the current issues that you think need to be addressed in the school system? And those 18 or so various topics came up from various groups, and they again are the same on all the surveys. And then section 4 is specific to that group. So on the parent survey, we're asking, I'm proud of my child's school. So they're answering that question. Employees are answering different questions. Students are answering different questions. And then section 5 is the demographic information about how you want to disaggregate the information. So just as kind of a 30,000-foot level, some of the information is going to come across so you can see how various groups feel about it and how you disaggregate that information on their current satisfaction level and the current emerging trends. Some of it is specific to that stakeholder group to say how are they feeling about things that are only important to them. So in terms of adding that question about a responsive and caring organization, or FCPS has a responsive and caring culture, if you want to ask it in that kind of framework, we could add that to every one of the surveys and find out how each one of those groups feel about their perception of the current state of affairs.
So just before we move on, it sounds like we've kind of moved past the question of the beliefs, vision, mission, and you understand where we're going with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So more into the survey
Ms.
now.
Moon.
Yes, Mr. Moon.
I am fine with just having one question on the mission statement and not going into others. But I support, Dr. Garja's suggestion about maybe adding a question, as you alluded to, all different kinds of, surveys about whether we are being, caring organization, responsive and caring organization.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Derna Kovacs?
This is a little question. Are these all going to be online surveys?
Yes.
On part 5, I'm looking at the parent one, so it's mark the cluster your children attend. I'm thinking some people will not know that. If we can have a link there to help them identify which cluster they're in, because I do think that will be important information. And that's right. Yeah, they're not going to know. I think a lot of people won't know what cluster they're in.
And so we had talked about that internally.
Or do you want pyramids instead?
Yeah, or put your base high school.
Base high school.
And I was wondering, the one on community has your legislative district. Pull
yeah.
my neighbors.
No, I think people will not know that. I think that, and then, so we need to find different ways to geographically identify them or provide them with links that will help them. And the links, they're not that easy to navigate either. So I'm thinking high school pyramids and... Yeah, that's true. I don't know. What does everybody think about that? How to identify them? Everyone knows who their high school feeder is. Or just a school?
We could do the high school pyramid. Yeah, because that's about 25.
People know what high school pyramid is.
And will elementary parents know what their high school pyramid is?
Yeah, because they'll know what everybody who buys their house in Fairfax County knows.
Everybody buys a house.
No.
Sorry, I meant people
Well,
buy their houses do that, but.
I mean, if we have some folks who don't check that, it's not going to kill the survey, right? I mean, it's just...
No. The reason that this is on here is to be able to disaggregate the information, so if you want to know how various clusters felt about various topics, you can find that out.
I think that's very, very important to me.
We thought about identifying your school, so you could narrow it down to the school level, but that's a list of 200 schools that you have to be on the survey that people have to scroll through and pick from the list. We thought that would be kind of tedious.
Well, if you do it, separate it out the way it is on the website, elementary, middle, high, you click there, that would be less clicks than going through 200. Because I think to be able to disaggregate it by area, it will be very, very important to see. So we need an accurate way to do that.
Okay.
And I think the schools would be the best way. That would be my...
Okay, Mrs. Smith?
I'm going to follow up on that first. I hate to tell you how many people don't know what their magisterial district is, but there's another whole story, right? It's like I asked them, well, who do you vote for the Board of Supervisors, I really have not had a chance to look at these because I hadn't seen they were posted until we sat down here. But one of the questions did concern me. Question number 31 says offering full-day kindergarten to all students. I guess I want to understand why that question's there. I can understand the question offering preschool to all students, because maybe that's something we should do. But when I read that question about offering full-day kindergarten, I don't feel like anybody's talking about backing away from it, so I don't see how the question helps. So if you could help me understand
Mrs.
that
Smith,
question.
which survey is that on all of them?
Yes, that's in all of them.
Delete it? Okay.
Mrs. Strauss?
Two things. Is it possible for people to enter their zip code as an identifier? That they will know. Well, but we know what zip codes are in what school. I don't know, because I am concerned, because I know I will have people in cluster 1 schools that will not know any of the dividing places, but they will know their zip code, and that may be it. They'll know what school their child currently attends and their zip code, but that's all. So.
Will do zip codes cross cluster lines, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. I guess at that, well, then maybe what school does your child currently attend, and what zip code are you in? If you could ask those two. Because there will be young children, parents are renters, they move around, and they're not going to know any of this other stuff. So anyway, that's one issue. I have a very specific question on question 17, part 3, on which one? Parent. Question 17, it says addressing the diverse needs of the entire school population. That when I first read it, I thought, how would I be able to answer that? Because you have diverse needs, usually means individual needs or subgroups. And then it says the entire student population. So is the intent of that, I mean, it hurt my brain to think about how I would do that. Because entire student population, it means like, well, are you helping all the kids on average? Or is it that you are helping my individual child or my individual subgroup to which I think my child belongs?
I think the
It's the
intent,
using in diverse and entire in the same line.
I think the intent of the question is that the district addresses all of the needs of the entire population, that they're just not addressing needs of certain subpopulations within the division.
I'm wondering if I might be addressing the diverse needs of the student population. And it's just using both diverse and entire in the same line
We
just
can take entire out.
feels cumbersome. Thanks.
Okay, I have a go back, but why don't we just go in order? Ms. McLaughlin and then Ms. Evans? Sorry.
I just wanted clarity, because I know you're getting 12 different opinions on, that section 5 about, where it is that people work and or live. And I think anytime you do a survey, the goal is really what is it you hope it's going to tell you? What is it you want to learn from the question? And so I guess I would say in the end, ideally, we want to just know from what school they're drawing their experience from, whether it's the parent, the child, the employee, or people who live near that school community. So I would leave it to Dr. Garza and Dr. Demetro to figure that out. But I would hope at minimum, as Ms. Darnell-Koufax said, if there is a way to make sure they indicate the school, zip code by itself would concern me, because we have zip codes. It's so messy. It could feed into several different schools, and then we might lose, I think, the meaningful information that we're trying to figure out, which is depending on which school this information is coming from, it might start to tell us patterns within the schools. Is that the case?
That's the intention behind it, about how you disaggregate this information. Okay. Do you disaggregate it to the cluster level? Do you disaggregate it to the pyramid level? Mm-hmm. Do you disaggregate it to the school level? Mm-hmm. The only issue with the school level is this is a check-the-box kind of survey. So do you put a list of 200 schools, which is going to be multiple pages? People are going to have to scroll through to find their school. So it's just the practical issue of the logistics of doing it by the school level with a district of
right,
your
so
size.
the high school pyramid might, at least then you're just checking one of 25.
Right, and there could be 25.
Right. And just real quick with number 14, since people were asking questions about clarity. Question number 14 said, there is transparent communication within FCPS schools. I got stuck on the word within because I thought, I'm not sure then what is it's asking because do we want transparent communication coming from FCPS? Because then it's transparent to the community, transparent to parents, students, but within makes it sound like, I don't know if you're transparent with each other.
Okay. So you would see it better if it said from FC.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Evans?
Well, first of all, I would support Dr. Garza's question on being responsive and caring. I think that's a good addition, so I support that. Now that we're here on 19, I think we could simplify that one by simply starting it with the word promoting and, cut out the first part and just say promoting students' physical, social, and emotional wellness. I think that's a lot, my advocacy would be that that's just a simpler, more straightforward question. Wait. On 19, yeah, rather than having it be about balancing one thing against another, because everything else is just, do we do this well? So that. But I think we can just ask a straightforward question about physical, social, and emotional wellness.
And would you like it to be promoting or supporting?
I think either one. Promoting, yeah. I think promoting makes sense.
Promoting makes more sense?
I think. What do people feel? Promoting? Yeah, okay.
All right. Mr. Stork is next.
Part of our conversation on the strategic planning, when we last met with the Board of Supervisors, we talked about their engagement, and I appreciate George Becerra's bringing that up, is how we intend to fit that in the process, and whether or not we would have a survey of some sort that we would ask them to engage with us on. That would be more of a different kind of engagement.
Yeah, we don't have on our agenda for today talking about engagement with other groups, and that includes the Board of Supervisors, and that is a priority of ours. But Dr. Garza, you had something to say about that?
Yes, we had a number of days that we had with Hank's group that we had kind of tied up just in case. We talked at Chairman's about that this week. We are looking at June 14th?
June 14th.
14th, which is a Saturday. But I was going to suggest to Hank, we're meeting after this, to see whether or not the chairman would send out an invitation to the Board of Supervisors to join us for breakfast and then have a session with them, then have a break, and then continue with you all. That's what I was going to propose. I believe that was what you had suggested, Mr. Moon. So
That is correct.
We were going to see if you all thought you could make that work, and might as well get your feedback if you think that's a good idea.
Could we, I think that is important for us to talk about today. Could we put that as our last agenda item and finish up with the survey and then come back to that? Because I do think it's important. Thank you. Who else did I have? Ms. McLaughlin?
I'm wrestling with Ms. Evans' suggestion on number 19. Just thinking about, again, our communities dialogue, especially recently. What I liked about the question is it's saying, we want the respondents to talk about what is important to them. And the question is it important to balance the division's academic focus with the development of students' physical, social, and emotional wellness? The key word in that question is balance, because I think what we hear from our families is we love that this is a school system that emphasizes academic achievement, but we also are becoming more and more mindful that we want a school system that is sensitive to and creates an environment that has a balance of those things. So that would be my only hesitation of Ms. Evans' suggestion, is I think it draws away from what we're really hoping to find out. Do people want that balance there? And then I think that would really help guide us to making sure, yep, they want to see both things honored. So that's just another perspective on that question.
So here's the risk of changing words in this. I mean, we could do that, but I think we'll be here for a long time, because what happens is you suggest a change that sounds great, and then Megan says, no, actually, I think this is why the original was great. And so do we want to go down this road at all, or do we want to say that, that ECRA has tried to reflect the conversations they've already had with the community in the language here, and that we live with it unless it's a conceptual, that it's a big picture kind of a conceptual question.
Well, you may want to ask both of those questions, actually, because one of the things that, and as you raise this issue, one of the things that emerged from the focus groups, particularly with students, was the balance between academic pressure and their sense of stress. So maybe one of the ways to ask this is to leave the balancing question, but to add a question about, we ask about addressing the diverse needs of the student population, various kinds of things, addressing the mental health and well-being needs of students. And should that receive greater emphasis in the organization, so that it gets at that topic on a standalone level, but it also addresses the topic on the balance question between how do you find the appropriate question. So adding something is not necessarily difficult at this point in time, and I'd rather get it done now, because one of the time constraints that we are under is we'd like to get this out on May 5th. And that's the target date, so that we can have the results back and the information for you for the conversation on June 14th. And so the time frame of getting this finalized, the words correct, and then translated into the various language that it's going to be disseminated in to have it ready on May 5th is...
yeah,
I would support that.
Good solution. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Mrs. Schultz?
So are we going by section? Are we staying in the section, or can
I think we're kind of
I'm
all
going to
over.
I'm going to change lanes and go to section 4.
Okay. On which survey?
That one. So I don't know, as a parent, I don't know what that means. And as a parent of children in conceivably 3 different schools, if they didn't go to a secondary school, I don't know how to answer that if I don't feel the same about each school. So I don't even really know actually what that is supposed to measure. The 36. I'm proud of my children's school. It's a right, and I don't even know what proud means. What does that mean? I'm not sure. Does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what it's such a. Well, that is yeah, and so I struggle with that as in terms of what are we measuring? I mean, measuring pride, and what does that meaningfully give us back? What if we find out people aren't proud? Well, what does that mean? What do we do? Well, if they're not happy, then let's ask them. I am happy with my children's school. I mean, that's an entirely clear statement. Well, satisfied, I think, has a pejorative sound to it. So if something else could be said there that is more clear of what is it that we're trying to get to, and what is it that we want to understand as a takeaway. And then the struggle, too, is for any of these, what do we do? Do we have parents fill multiple, how do we address children in multiple schools? Because there may be, and in my case there is, a vastly different set of data that applies to one school than does another. And
well, you do have the option on question 44 to expand on your responses, or on question 39 to please expand on your rating as to why you said that. So there is an open-ended statement that somebody could add in that response to say, I checked that as a 3 because I'm really happy with one child's school, but somewhat unhappy with another child's school. So there is a place for a person in that situation to provide an explanation if they choose to do that. Whether they'll know to do that is...
I think the simplification, and I'm assuming that these are going to be translated into other languages.
Yes.
happy with a child's school is something that is simple to understand. I think proud of may not translate well. It doesn't. So I'm just, I'll yield to the majority, but I'm just saying I think that is a nebulous phrase that I don't think at the end, regardless of where the responses wind up, gives us very much to work with. Am I happy with my child's school? Am I not happy with my child's school? That's pretty clear.
This is getting at the school level information, so if you're comfortable with that.
So happy with instead of proud of? There was no particular reason why they chose proud, just came out. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Reed? Still on the survey?
Yeah, but not a specific question. I guess it's what isn't here versus what is. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. Okay. And again, I guess I'm taking a step back and just making sure that we're all thinking about this the same way. Because as I'm listening to the discussion, it sounds an awful lot like a satisfaction survey, like, a user survey. And so I'm trying to work backwards almost and say, why would we ask that question? What information would it yield that will help us develop a strategic plan? Right, so that, and maybe that's inherent in the work here, but I'm not sure, for example, that we've ever even asked the questions like, do people agree with our achievement goals, academics, essential life skills, responsibility to the community? I mean, just at a very basic level. Do people know that those are the three? I would guess probably not. And I don't know, maybe some people think this is crazy, but I'm just wondering whether that would be an affirmation of direction. In other words, we spend time talking about being good environmental stewards, learning to self-advocate, all these things. One, do people know that we're doing that? And two, do they agree on that as a direction? And I don't know if this is appropriate, but there are many examples, I think, like that, and I won't go on too much about that, but it just makes me wonder a little bit whether there are other questions that we should be asking, perhaps, that would help us chart a course to either affirm that we're on the right path or get input in terms of narrowing, particularly with the budget situation, narrowing our focus and our direction and path. So I don't know, does anybody have a reaction? Or Hank, do you have a reaction to that, or Dan?
I think you could ask the general goal and put those on in terms of back to the mission statement if you wanted to ask those three academic goals of how strongly you agree with them. I think if you get to the level of detail of, if you take your first academic goal, it's almost a page long. So to put that whole goal on it and to ask somebody to agree with it, there's so much information in it, I don't know how somebody would react. But if you take the three basic goal statements, those could be part of the beginning part of the document to say, how strongly do people agree with that being an important academic goal? And it would help you provide, it would give you some feedback in terms of the strategic direction.
Il-Young, did you have something you wanted to say in response?
I'm not okay.
Okay. Mrs. Smith?
What do you think of the suggestion?
I did want to respond. So, yeah, it feels like a gazillion years ago, but for those of you that weren't around, we took out all the student achievement goals to the community with 30-some meetings, and one of the things we also did in that process, we gave them points. How many points would you give the academics, the essential life skills and responsibility to the community? Where would you put your resources to support those? So it wasn't a total vacuum that, okay, we did these and the community didn't provide feedback, and then the board did adjust them based to that. I guess my thinking was when we were going down this process with the strategic plan that we weren't going to so much focus on what the student achievement goals were, but that we were going to focus more on what the portrait of a graduate was. So I guess for me, I don't know how much I'd want to go down the road of asking them questions about the student achievement goals, because I thought we were going to build more on the portrait of a graduate.
All right. Anything else about the survey? Questions, suggestions? I had a couple of questions. One of the things that we have heard about our students is that their relationships with their teachers is a challenge that came out of the PISA test that we did. And I don't see anything on Part 4 for the students where it sort of says, my relationships with my teachers. I have good relationships with my teachers or something like that. There's 39 says I have positive relationships with my classmates. Maybe we could add one that says I have positive relationships with teachers. And then also, kind of along the same lines, I don't, in Part 4 for the employees, I also, and maybe we've already gotten to this, but I don't see anything that gets to working conditions. I don't know really necessarily how to put it in there, but if you look at Part 4 for the employees, I don't see any, I just don't see anything in there unless I'm missing it that says, you know, my school is a good place to work. I have positive relationships with my colleagues. I
I think it's a very
No?
good question, but it's my understanding, in this right, Dan, that lots of other data has been provided to ECRA, including the working conditions results, or if they haven't gotten that yet, they will get it when you all get it. So we've provided you some background. Is that right, Dan? You want to address that?
Right. So we took some effort within the organization to look at other surveys that we've collected to make sure we weren't being overly redundant in this one. So that information will be available in this process.
Makes sense, thank you. Okay. Anything else on the survey? Do you need any more guidance from us on the survey, do you think? Yeah. Oh, Dan?
I just had one. If I just, and this is in Part 4, and I think it's in each of the sections in some degree. This is on the parent one. So the framework that says at 36, I'm proud of my child's school. If I say, yep, I strongly agree with that. My child's school is preparing my children to be successful in life. Yep, I strongly agree with that. My children feel overwhelmed by what is expected of them at school. Yep. So there's a change of format in your survey. Was there a strategic design? I mean, the other ones are framed in a positive, and then you get to that one, and it's framed in a negative.
I don't know. I'll have to ask Gina that question.
If there is a strategic reason for it, I would say go for it. If there's not, then I would say that that's confusing.
Okay.
Okay. The only other question I have is, we talked about the pyramids for the employees, students, and parents. What would you like to use for the community members to disaggregate the information, or do you not need to disaggregate the information for community members? Because we put down magisterial district, but if you're saying they won't know that.
Ted, Mr. Belkoff?
Well, I think maybe the best you can do is nearest elementary school. People would probably know that. Nobody, you know, you can't count on people knowing their supervisor district or pyramid or anything. And I'm assuming that in terms of the identification of the school, that these are just, it's just going to be a drop down, right? So you have a drop down for high school, you have a drop down for middle school, and you have a drop down for 150 elementary schools. But people can cope with that.
You're suggesting nearest elementary school. Did anybody else have a comment? Ms. McLaughlin?
I think that community members who will take the time to fill this out, there's a greater likelihood that they're going to know at least the magisterial district that they live in. So I would propose that would probably work well. Well, I will say that I worry about the nearest elementary school just because of the 150. So then I would say
Could do nearest high school, maybe.
the nearest high school, most people know a high school that they live near.
Are we gathering any other demographic data from the just community survey? We're not, right?
No.
Age or anything like that? No? Okay.
Well, there is
There
an
is?
age.
Oh, sorry.
There's an age range that people are putting down.
Years in the community.
And years in the community. And then race and if they do have children attending or did have children attending.
All right, thank you. Mr. Moon?
I have one naive question to ask to an expert. When people see in a survey like this with a 50-some questions, the number of questions are not going to discourage them?
It may.
That's one worry on my part, whether we're not asking too many questions. But again, you the experts, I'm going to leave it up to you.
It was trying to seek a balance between hitting the topics that emerged and getting enough information from people to help move the agenda forward. So
Sometimes to overcome that, used in other places or I've seen in surveys I've been asked to complete, is if you tell them up front how long it's
Estimated time.
the approximate time it will take to complete. Because while it may look like a lot of questions, it may only take them 5 to 10 minutes to get it to complete it. So if you all could give them estimated time, I think that would help mitigate that.
Okay, any last thoughts on this survey? Ms. McLaughlin?
Based on what Chairman Moon said about the Community Strategic Planning Survey, I know that when we've, I think it was DECO had done like a satisfaction survey, and some of the responses that we were getting back from people were, I have no idea to a lot of the questions. So I guess it does make sense that the other 3 stakeholder groups, parents, students, and employees, could answer this type of specificity. But I'm wondering if there would be a value and a benefit if this one were more macro level. And I'm channeling Patty Reed again right now. What matters to a community stakeholder who doesn't necessarily have children in the schools anymore is going to be different than the stakeholders who are in our schools, on a daily basis for direct services. So that would be my only thinking, is that we might think that the specificity they're going to give us, they might even just start guessing or just giving us 3s, and it may not give us the value add and the return on their time and our gleaning information from it. So I know you don't want more work, but I do think that might have a value there to think about this one looking different from the other 3.
Simplify the community survey.
Simplify the community survey and really, think about, based on the community feedback you got, what were the things that they really wanted to speak to in terms of living in Fairfax County and the strategic focus they'd like to see in their public school system.
Okay.
All right. So I think we have to get back to the question of meeting with the Board of Supervisors for breakfast, right? So what is that, June 14th? Is that the day? Okay. Ms. Dernick,
I have a question. Do we have next steps? Because I know I directed Mr. Paris to do that.
Right. Do we have next steps?
Okay. Can we see this?
Your next steps or the next steps in this process? So the next steps in this process, the survey goes out May 5th.
Correct.
We have a date on hold for June 14th to come back, or we have sometime dates on either side of that if we decide to do something different than having breakfast with the Board of Supervisors and our retreat on the Saturday. But we have a hold on that. And then, and during that time period, our partners will come back, as Hank suggested, share some preliminary findings. It won't be the whole finding package, but it'll be the general themes and hopefully some information from the survey. And then in July, we have a 2-day retreat, which a chunk of that will be targeted at establishing our priorities, and that would be facilitated as well by our partners.
I think one other next step Ms. Dernick Kovacs was talking about is making sure, in fact, Dan, that we go through and make sure that it's reflected, key elements of the portrait of a graduate are reflected.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Okay, will do.
On next steps?
Well, Pam wants to.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
take a look
Sure,
at
let's do
next
that.
steps, I think. Is that, or could we get through maybe the question about the 14th and then come back to next steps?
Sure.
Because there might be next steps on that. So are we talking about the 14th? Go ahead, Ms. McLaughlin.
Yeah, it would be helpful for me personally to know a little bit more about the time frame, because my son's graduating and we're actually having a graduation party that afternoon with 2 other families for 3 graduates. So not really excited about an important meeting like this happening on that day, but ideally the earlier the better, because I hate to miss being a part of this.
And
I'm sorry, so do we have an answer to that question? Is it expected to be in the morning so that afternoon activities could go on?
I don't know how long it was going to take. We were going to actually start working on what kind of time frame, but it would be at least the full morning. So if that's
I know, it's not till the afternoon, but I mean, I can go and find out tonight, are we talking about something that's at 4 o'clock, or is it, which I would envision more, and then we would be okay.
Oh, I thought on the 14th we were talking about having the Board of Supervisors in for breakfast and then continuing for the morning.
Okay, all right, so
we're not, because right now the calendar says all day. So all day with our work tends to be till 5 o'clock. So that's why I raised it.
Okay, so if we can get a little more clarity, yes.
And with this in mind, we can purposefully plan to be done earlier. And I apologize, it's on a date where there are graduation events going on, but we can just make certain that we're completed early enough.
Okay, Mrs. Schultz, on the 14th?
Yeah, and I had already brought this up as well, because we had a hold on our calendar, I believe, that week, maybe Thursday or so. So we already had, an evening blocked on our schedule, and that's been given up. So,
there was a request. There was an inquiry and request from actually Mrs. Schultz that not only did she have something else scheduled on the afternoon of 14th, just like you, I think it was a little.
Well, I don't know when it is, because that's
right. But
that's my nephew's
why
Eagle
not
Scout.
using the June 12th? But in the chairman's meeting, we look at the schedule, and there is a graduation on that day in the evening. And I figured that at least a Lee District board member, maybe possibly Springfield District, and 3 at-large board members might want to attend Key Center graduation. That is why I avoided graduation.
So never a good time.
Right, Key Center graduation. So if a board member say that, I would rather do this on Thursday night rather than going to graduation.
I'd rather do this on Thursday night because, I acknowledge that board members have students who are graduating, and my nephew's Eagle Scout project.
I do not know Hank's schedule. Dr. Dimitri's schedule for Thursday night on that day.
We can probably make anything work. I think we were working around the Board of Supervisors.
Then we cannot do a breakfast with the Board of Supervisors.
What's June the cocktails?
Oh boy,
you may get a
I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, so a couple things. I think maybe we need to let you guys go back and find the date, but we do need to talk about how we're engaging the Board of Supervisors. If we're not going to do a breakfast meeting with them on that Saturday, then we need to find another opportunity. And I assume it would just be a meeting with both boards. We'd get a presentation by ECRA, and then discussion, probably lasts an hour and a half or something like that. So I don't know where or when, but I think we need to get that scheduled as well. That's my thought. You talking about the night of the 12th?
Yeah, you could do 6 to 8 with the Board of Supervisors, and then 8 to 10 with whatever we're doing. It's just I'm just throwing out ideas.
Let's see which day the board members prefer. Okay, whether June 12th or June 14th. Thursday night or Saturday morning.
Okay, Mr. Velkoff?
If I may, I'm going to say this as respectfully as I can, but we are elected and we've made choices, and some of the choices that we are expected to make sometimes are going to conflict with our own personal family interests. And, I think if we have to schedule around everyone's individual family needs, I don't know how we're going to get anything done. And I have made decisions in the past to not participate in some things that I certainly would have liked to go to, but I made a personal judgment that it was my responsibility as a board member to be here and not at some other event that I wanted to be at. So I'm not really happy with the direction that we're going. I mean, we can't plan around 12 people's family schedules.
Besides, I think it's a simple task deciding between those 2 dates. So let's decide on the date. We don't need to argue on this one.
You want us to decide right now?
Let's decide on right now.
Okay, so either Saturday
because
morning
I thought,
until about 1.
I thought that Saturday would be a more prudent choice between those 2 dates, but I could be wrong.
Okay. I was going to say, let's let Mr. Moon go back and make the decision and take all the heat, but okay, we'll make a decision now. So we've got either Thursday evening starting at 6 and going late till 10. There's already a hold for that night, okay. Starting at 5 and going till, okay, so, and we're trying to fit in an hour and a half meeting with the Board of Supervisors and then cocktails, right? And then our conversation. Or Saturday morning, starting about whatever, 8:30 and going till 1? I mean, if afternoon things can happen, if we go till 1. So those are our options. Saturday, 8:30 to 1, or Thursday evening, 5 till 10, probably. Discussion? Let's just have a vote. Let's just vote. Okay. If you, yeah, go ahead.
I do think, I appreciate that Mr. Velkoff was trying to be polite, but I have to say, it's really hard to have a colleague question any one of us as elected officials that our children's graduation event is suddenly you owe it to the public, and so how dare you not honor your.
Ms. McLaughlin, if I could, I know we don't really need to go there, I don't think. So, show of hands, how many people prefer? And you can only vote once. How many people prefer?
I was about to say, what if you don't care?
Then don't vote, I guess. Yeah. How many people prefer Thursday evening?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6 for Thursday evening, Saturday morning. Huh. All right.
1, 2.
Thursday evening, we'll do it. Okay. So, but now, don't we have to make sure that the supervisors can make it?
Would have to ask.
And if they cannot, we need an alternate plan for meeting with them, right?
I think it's going to be somewhat similar, right? We're going to have some that could make it on Thursday night, some that would prefer Saturday. So I think probably the chairman just sends them an invitation.
And they have to come here, Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Okay, all I would like to get out of this is some understanding of how we're moving forward to include the Board of Supervisors. I think it's important that we do that. And we can't just say, oh, they can't make it on Thursday night, therefore we're not doing it. That's all I'm saying. So who do we assign to this, Mr. Stork?
I would just ask somebody to be assigned to it and we move on, because I realize it's going to be multiple options and iterations, and in the end, that may not be the one we end up with anyway. So,
okay, Mr. Chair, I think that's your job then.
It is.
What is my job?
We pay him big money for that job.
I mean,
so
I picked Saturday morning, considering.
Right, but okay,
I've
we
been
have
considered
Thursday. We've chosen
Thursday's on the schedule
Thursday.
now.
Thursday's on the schedule. If the supervisors can't meet us, you need to find another time when they can meet with us. Okay, I think that's the suggestion, because we're not going to do it right now. Ms. Evans.
Yes, I just wanted to find out if this next time on June 12th is going to be when we're next going to review the portrait of the graduate again. Are we going to, because we had talked about how we are going to go back over that and at some point, as part of this process, finalize that.
I wouldn't think that would be the time, although we do need to schedule that because we'll have our ECRA consultants there. So we probably could do that without them.
Okay.
And that way we can really focus their time on the other work that's already planned.
So maybe
but your
the
point's well
retreat?
taken. I think probably maybe prior to that would be a good time for us to revisit.
Oh, all right.
So
I
we'll
think the main reason for the June meeting is to share the results of the survey and what we've learned so far, to give you some time to process that information before we discuss the plan in July. So the idea is to have enough information shared and enough time for you to think about what that information is, so that the July discussion is as productive as possible. And the portrait of the graduate discussion would fit really well, I think, into the July discussion, actually, in terms of the strategic plan. So,
But Dr. Garza, you were saying you
that's
thought
fine.
we
If
needed
you all think that you can build that in and have sufficient time, that's great.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, next steps. Thank you, Mrs. Goddard, for being ahead of us here. Review portrait of a graduate 5-column sheet, and that is, right, Dan's job. Add statement about caring and responsive. Modify question 45 to state identify your high school pyramid. Delete question 31, full-day kindergarten. Modify question 17 to delete the word entire. Modify question 14 within to from. Add survey about mental health and well-being. Modify question 36, proud to happy. Add question in part 4 to address relationship with teachers. Modify question 38 in part 4, parent survey, to a positive statement. Okay. Add a question in part 4 to indicate nearest high school. Chairman to invite the Board of Supervisors Thursday, June 12th to meet with the board. ECRO may present information at the July retreat. What kind of information? What was that last thing?
I think we'll have some initial draft to start discussing the strategic plan.
Strategic plan draft?
I don't know that you need to include that. I think ECRA, they know what, that's their, I think their work to.
So take that off. Ms.
Right.
Derenak Kofax?
Modify question 45, just identify your high school pyramid. I thought we were going to do identify school. Or did we not really come to terms with that?
Maybe we should go ahead and vote. I mean, I think.
It was for the parent one because we felt that some elementary school parents may not know which their high school.
Right, but I think the issue is that we've got, a page and a half of schools.
Why is it a page and a half? I mean, everybody,
It's
when
not.
you have to scroll through, you have to scroll through 50 states to get your state. I mean, people are used to that kind of. But if you say, middle, elementary, I don't know, Ted, can you
we have a
Can you do it?
drop-down menu or
yeah,
not?
that's what I'm saying. You can
I'll
do
explore
it.
what the possibilities are.
Thank you. It's not a hard programming thing.
Well, if we can have a drop-down
school.
menu, you're suggesting that we do that, right? Okay, we'll see if we can.
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right, anything else? I guess I would like a next step there that says if the Board of Supervisors can't make it on the 12th, we continue to find a time to work with them, to meet with them, okay?
Okay, I'll find June 14th. Joking.
Mrs. Reed, did you say?
I just wonder whether we wanted to add the question about the student achievement goals, 1, 2, 3, whether people felt that was worth confirming that.
Thumb up, thumb down, do we need that in the survey?
What do people think?
What is that?
Confirming that those are the 3 goal academics, life skills, and responsibility to the community.
Confirm their support for it?
Yes.
Their support for
Yes.
it, their agreement.
Both. That they know that those are the goals and that they support them.
They won't know it till we tell it to them.
Right. I don't know. Is it worth asking or not? I'm just wondering in terms of strategic direction. If they say, oh, you shouldn't be teaching them, responsibility of the community, then maybe that's a direction. I don't know.
I'm not prepared to add any more questions.
No. So we don't need it?
I think that will come out in the process, right? Is get the feedback from the community. I think then you all, based upon what we find out, you all will be able to be in a position to determine whether or not those goals need to change as a result. So I think it'll come up in the natural flow of the work. Do you not agree with that, Hank?
So. I think it will.
Yeah, I'm having trouble connecting the dots a little bit, but I'll trust you.
Okay. Ms. Evans?
Do we need to reference the portrait of the graduate, or is that just understood that we're doing it?
In the survey?
Oh, no, I'm not talking about the survey. I mean the ongoing conversation that we've now said we're going to do in July.
I think what was referred to is the June 12th meeting, the Thursday night meeting, that you all were going to build in some time to have us go back over the portrait of a graduate to see if there's any other modifications that need to be made.
We'll
after the Board of Supervisors, if that not works.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you all once again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll take just a 5-minute break before the next one.